You're listening to Loughy and Savoca, a fantasy football podcast, episode 11. And that means it's September 1st. It also means that the regular season is one calendar week away before we kick off the season, Thursday night football between the Bills and the Rams. But this is also the most busy drafting time of any point of the season. And we're here to make sure that you don't make any mistakes. I'm Dave Loughren at Loughy_D on Twitter, LOUGHY_D. And as always, joined by Matt Savoca at Draftaholic. What's going on, brother?
So happy we're just a week away from football. And man, the NFL did this right with Rams Bills to start things off. Like, how pumped could you possibly be? And yes, you alluded to it. This is the Give Me the Answers episode. If you haven't done any research whatsoever, I believe you could come out of a fantasy draft with a decent squad, a more than decent squad, by just listening to this episode. Simple as that. And what's up, producer Phil? Thanks for all your help behind the glass as well. Let's roll. I'm excited, man.
Putting some pressure on us, dude.
I mean, hey, this is what we got to do. We got to get people ready, and this is what we've done all summer. But let's say you're just getting into it, and, you know, some people got busy schedules all summer long, and now you got to draft this Labor Day weekend, and you got to beat your friends.
And keep in mind, we're talking about must-draft players in each round, guys that you should be circling on your cheat sheets or your draft or whatever that is. But keep in mind as well that it doesn't mean those are the only guys you can draft. Right, like there are, particularly in the earlier rounds. We're going to give you some guys that we really like, right? That we think you should be targeting. But if they're not there, it doesn't mean you're in dire straits. You're still going to have a lot of great players out there. I mean, all the way up through we're going 10 rounds. There are still players in the 10th round, in the 9th round, that I really feel good about if I manage to land them. And as a matter of fact, we did our internal Stokastic drafts yesterday, and you get into the 9th, 10th round, I'm looking at it, I'm saying, and these are some sharp people. These are some savvy people you're drafting with, guys that, developed all of the tools at Stokastic that have made a lot of money playing fantasy sports, but still there were ways to get depth. And in that 8th, 9th, and 10th round, specifically 9th and later, Matt, I think there's some opportunities to where if you don't get, say, running backs that you want early on, you can really start to load up on your bench and give yourself some depth and give yourself a whole lot of upside at several positions.
Absolutely. And I've talked about this on several shows before, but in the early rounds, we're really just looking for us to not lose our drafts. We're looking for players to meet their ADP-based expectations. If they exceed it, well, that's why we're going to pick them among other players within their draft tier. But once you get to the later parts of the draft, the floor is zero. The floor is nothing. The floor is you're dropping them. So you might as well shoot for the ceiling and less so for startability. Once you hit that 9th, 10th round, you're going to see that today. But that means we've got the floor ceiling combinations early in the draft, and that's really important as well.
And if you guys haven't subscribed to the channel on YouTube or to the podcast, left a rating or review, hit that thumbs up, all the stuff that helps us keep the lights on. Greatly appreciate if you take a single second, a couple seconds, to be fair. If you're leaving a glowing review, maybe a minute, but it goes a long way. And I promise that 1 minute out of your day is very helpful for us. Man, Nolan, who is the director of content at Stokastic, really fired me up yesterday. The draft starts at 8:30, okay? Now, there's always like a 2-minute grace period when drafts start, right? Like the draft starts at 8:30 and then it's like, okay, it starts actually in 2 minutes or a minute and a half.
Like the settle in period. Yes.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Like
Absolutely.
Every draft you've ever been in, okay? It's 8:32 and I'm logging in, launching the draft board, launching the draft room, and it's on pick 16. Like, okay, I'm late. I get it. I hope you're listening too, Nolan. I'm 2 minutes late. Normally, though, that's right on time, and I'm pick 9. I'm like, there's no way that I get screwed here. Pick 16. I got auto-drafted on my first pick. So what are you doing, man? You couldn't pause it? He's like, I did. I said, yeah, we're at pick 16 already. I mean, yes, Stefon Diggs, fine. It's one pick. If you get auto-drafted,
sure.
make sure it's in the first round, right? But like, dude, you knew I wasn't in the room. You couldn't have told me like, hey, all right, let's just let everyone get in the room. These are our friends, but you know what I mean? These are our friends. These are our co-workers. I got screwed, Matt.
A for auto draft, the former Awesemo, now Stokastic A league is now the auto draft league. Honestly, Stephon Diggs was one of my honorable mentions for my top player in round one, just because of the stability, the offense he's on. Nothing went wrong with that first round auto pick. You got a little lucky there, but man, that's tough, man. I mean, I understand life gets in the way too, because as much as I would like to just be logged in, got all my tools, got my multi-monitor set up, I don't always have that ability, especially if you get a little bit older, you got a kid or something like that, which I know you do. Like, look, these things happen, but 2 minutes into the scheduled time in pick 16 is a little
that's crazy,
a little quick
right?
on the trigger. Yeah, that's quick on the trigger.
How is that even possible is my question.
So that means that someone went, all right, guys, we got 11 to 12 in here. That's good enough. Let's start it up.
Yeah, Adam wasn't in there either, but I'm not sure he ever showed. Anyway, Matt's too nice of a guy to really pile on, but he understands the frustration. And you know what? Might be some people in the comments going, hey, you were late. It's your fault. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, this isn't an FFPC or an underdog draft.
That happened to me about a decade ago with some college buddies, and it was the year Peyton Manning was going in the upper rounds, and he didn't play a snap that year.
And you auto-drafted him? See, that's brutal. And it was a quarterback back when people still drafted QBs in the first round. All right, speaking of the first round, let's dive in. Yes, Jonathan Taylor, Christian, like these guys, of course, they're must drafts. Do you want to specify any format here in terms of PPR or standard? Because guys like Eckler can swing kind of dramatically. So can some of these wide receivers in standard leagues.
My default thinking, and if I don't say anything, is half PPR, because I feel like it splits the difference. Works and it helps people out. The ADP I'm using today is half PPR, but it is a good thing to mention. Obviously, players like Austin Eckler, DeAndre Swift in the second round, they're going to get slight bumps because of their receptions. Obviously, Alvin Kamara is the king of this over the last few years. And then at the very top, Christian McCaffrey, I think, makes a strong case for 101 overall as well in full PPR. But I'm actually going to go with these mid-tier, I say in quotation marks, running back ones in the first round. Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry. I think there's some fear here in the sense that they're both at ages where we feel they can fall off. Cook is a year younger, but he's been more injury prone. And then Henry had his most significant injury of his career last year, has a plate in that foot. But when he's on the field, the opportunity level is only rivaled by Christian McCaffrey. And you can pick him sometimes 6, 7, 8 picks later. So I am not afraid of Derrick Henry in these running back hungry leagues. I think he's up there in the upper tier with these running backs, and you don't have to pay that premium draft capital. I think Dalvin Cook at the end of the first is an even better bet when you're talking about upside and downside. But if you're stuck in the middle and you feel like you need a running back because you know what your draft room is like, just try to erase all the fears about Derrick Henry. The upside is still the number one overall player in fantasy.
Yeah, at this point, the only question is, like, how does their offense function? And I think it'll still be fine. I do. I think they'll be fine. Their defense is going to be good enough. I'm not particularly worried there. It's odd to me that, and I get it though. He has a lot of mileage on him, but it's odd to me that a lot of people are unwilling entirely to draft Derrick Henry, but are all over Najee Harris. And I only say that because Najee Harris, it's not like he's without question marks. You know what I mean? Listen, he finished the season really strong last year. No denying that. He was a rookie on a team where Ben Roethlisberger struggled, so you could make that argument as well that, hey, Ben Roethlisberger wasn't very good. But he averaged less than 4 yards per carry. It was a ton of receiving work, which to some extent dwindled a bit down the stretch. He had one game with, 20 targets or something stupid that definitely inflated that. 19 targets, by the way. I like Najee Harris. I have no problem with him in the first round. Volume is king in fantasy football. But I don't think it should mean that you're foregoing guys like Henry, or specifically, and this was going to be my guy, Dalvin Cook. He's just not going to have only 6 touchdowns again. It's just not going to happen. Dalvin Cook is not going to have 6 touchdowns given his opportunities. You know, he was still among the league leaders in carries inside the 10. He's still going to get the large, probably if he's healthy, all of the goal line carries. Like, all of that is right there. And to look at him in the middle of this round after going, what was he, like a top 3 pick last year? I still think you're getting great value on Dalvin Cook. Does he miss a couple games? Yeah, it's possible. It's definitely possible, but I'm not necessarily sure that matters if you're willing to draft, you know, Christian McCaffrey where you're taking him, or if you're willing to draft Derrick Henry where you're taking him. I think all of those guys are fine, but they all carry certain red flags, or I should say question marks, going into the season.
Yeah. I think the next thing, too, we got to think about is, what does this Minnesota offense look like in terms of up-tempo play, in terms of pass rate? Because Minnesota, their old offensive scheme, quite run heavy, which I guess you would say is good for the running back in terms of opportunity, but the value of that opportunity isn't that strong. Minnesota was towards the bottom of the pack in expected passes per play per the Stokastic advanced stats tool. The Rams were top 5 in expected passes in our advanced stats tool. So now, if you consider that offense moving towards a more, first of all, more plays per game and more passes per game, suddenly, especially in any sort of PPR setting, I think Dalvin Cook has a higher floor and ceiling when you consider that touchdown rate. We got to move on here, but in case you were wondering, the first round is chock full of league-winning potential players this year. A really, really solid first round. I actually think it goes 13 or 14 deep. It's a little transition to the second round, because my true second round player is, it should feel like an honor to draft Travis Kelce in the second. That's how I feel this year. He should be a first round pick, but there's just enough first rounders, especially running backs, where people are fading Kelce a little bit because of his age.
Yeah, I have no problems with it. I mean, anytime you want to draft Travis Kelce there, assuming it's always odd drafting a tight end in the first or second round. It's not wrong, but it's odd because just the makeup of your draft, it changes pretty dramatically after that said pick. Now, granted, all you're really doing is drafting an elite wide receiver at the tight end position. And if you look at it that way, it makes it a lot more palatable. I love Travis Kelce. No problems with him there. No more Tyreek Hill. Will we be saying the same thing next year? I don't know. Maybe. But the whole age regression thing, or age deterioration given his age, it's hard to buy that when we haven't seen it yet. You know, and people have been saying that about Tom Brady for a long time now, and he keeps being the MVP or MVP candidate. Speaking of Brady, and speaking of the pass catching upside that both bolsters the floor and ceiling, Leonard Fournette is the last pick in the second round, according to ADP right now. Now, are there some questions? Yeah, I guess. Like, if you're worried about Rachaad White, sure. But he was so good last year that I really don't have much. He was the RB7 in half-point formats, and he missed the final 3 games of the season. Like, that's how good he was. If you were to have taken, he would have been for sure better than, you know, James Conner. He finished 28 points behind him. You get 3 games out of Leonard Fournette, average less than 10 points a game over that. Easy. That puts him in top 5 last year if he plays a full season. He's with Tom Brady. And despite the insane amount of mouths to feed in that offense, he's still dominated. He's still crushed. Ronald Jones is gone. So, you know, your lead runner seems to be clearly Leonard Fournette. Let's say you don't get a wide receiver or a running back in the first round. You go Chase, or you go Kupp, or, you know, you're probably earlier on, right? So, like, say Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, and Leonard Fournette is there. I'll take him every single time. I really have zero issues going with him, especially given that he's going 3 picks ahead of Ezekiel Elliott, who I have a lot less count. If you're worried about Rachaad White and not Tony Pollard, well, we should come have a talk.
Yeah, that's well said. And look, I think Fournette's draft price is just perfect, right? Because it's at this spot where the end of the second round, you might have been tempted to take one of those top 3 wide receivers, and maybe you pulled the trigger, and now you're really concerned about hitting the 3rd round, the RB dead zone, without any type of option. And Leonard Fournette sitting there, number 5 amongst all running backs last year in expected fantasy points per game. The opportunity value was actually 1.5 expected fantasy points better than my pick, Travis Kelce. And we should also mention that in our favorite plays, our favorite draft picks at ADP episode 10 last week, I mentioned Saquon Barkley and Javonte Williams in this draft round. I think the second round is so good. We've actually been saying for a month that the second round running backs are just awesome. Even some of the ones that we haven't spent as much time on, DeAndre Swift, Aaron Jones, although there are some question mark there. Leonard Fournette is going to get a huge amount of opportunity on the fastest pace, most pass heavy, most red zone the highest red zone likelihood offense in the NFL. That's a bet I'm willing to make.
Me too. He's 7th in fantasy points per game. I think he's like the 14th or 13th running back going off the board. So it's a risk I'm willing to take. I want to move on to round 3, but I did want to ask you about someone that I saw go 27th overall in our draft last night. Deebo Samuel was the wide receiver 2 last year. Okay, wide receiver 2. And the one thing that stands out about Deebo Samuel to me is even if Trey Lance is bad, even if Trey Lance is not good, okay, and I think he'll be fine. I'm not as much on the hype train as everybody else, but I think he'll be fine. From fantasy standpoint, he's got legs. I'm talking about like being able to actually support multiple pass catchers and support a quality offense. Even if he's bad, with Deebo being a weapon that can do anything, you can use him in the flat, you can use him downfield, you can use him in the backfield as a running back, however you want. Wouldn't they just emphasize getting him the ball as much as possible because he's probably the best receiver in the league after the catch anyway?
I've heard some really sharp people talking about how Deebo Samuel might be set up to have a huge regression season in the sense that Kyle Shanahan's offense can scheme players into fantastic seasons that once figured out can sometimes put the damper on. And by that time, Kyle Shanahan's come up with his next wrinkle in his offense. We saw this with Washington several times where RG3 had some fantastic seasons, Alfred Morris as well, but then it was quickly gobbled up. And they were poor fantasy picks the following year. Now, I think Deebo Samuel is more talented as an individual player, but just looking at pace of play and looking at rush rates and pass rates, San Francisco looks like one of the most conservative teams in football, and a rush is less valuable than a target. So even though the opportunity level is decent, I think 30th overall is about right for Deebo Samuel in a half PPR league.
Okay, fair enough. But that argument that you were talking about to me is insanity. I mean, okay, two things. Do you pay him $74 million to not use him? And if you're Kyle Shanahan and you're smart, wouldn't you just find different ways to use him?
I absolutely think they're going to get creative with him. I think in terms of overall opportunities per game, he probably looks better than some of these other wide receivers, right? Because some of them are rushes. But what do you really get on a per rush basis in a normal world? Like, he scored an insane amount of rushing touchdowns and had an insane amount of broken tackles as a rusher. I'm not saying he will suddenly become just league average, but even if he comes down a little bit and scores less touchdowns, it doesn't really do much for you. And then when you consider the fact that they pass pretty much the least amount in the NFL, when you look at the advanced stats, I don't know. Look, this is going to look like a fish move one way or the other, right? Because the possibility of him just like becoming wide receiver 1 is also in the range of outcomes here. But there is a lot of warts on this profile in a way that you usually can't say for the previous year's wide receiver 2.
Well, that argument that you make there, to me, makes a lot more sense. Just in that, like, all right, the style of play here, the pace of play, not a pass-heavy team. Yeah, but I don't think you would give him all that money to not find creative ways to use a guy that was, again, arguably with the ball in his hands, the most dynamic player in the league last year. So
I agree. I mean, on a per rush basis, he was insane. Like, he broke 40% of would-be tacklers last year.
So, okay, regression season. He is, let's see, there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. there's a lot of wide receivers going ahead of Deebo Samuel. So I don't know. Maybe it's not 9. I went into the 3rd round. It's a lot though. So all right, you think around so you would not take him in the 2nd round. You would wait till the 3rd round.
I would take him in the mid third, early to mid.
Then who in the 3rd round right now stands out to you as that guy you're looking to get everywhere?
So if I didn't take Kelsey, I'm really heavily considering Kyle Pitts because I think the top 3 tight ends are that premier tier that you want to focus on, less so on Darren Waller and George Kittle in a non-best ball format. In a season-long managed league, I think the volatility for players like Waller and Kittle are not going to be fun for the draft capital you spend. I'm going to say in general here, the 3rd through the 7th round, the wide receiver position is so much fun. And there's also extra value of going wide receiver a little bit earlier because then maybe I'll be able to sneak in one of these 7th, 8th round quarterbacks that I really, really like as well. So if not Pitts, I like Michael Pittman a ton. I have been effusive about A.J. Brown and his upside in the Eagles offense. So I'm considering the top tier wide receiver that I can get. Sometimes that's even Mike Evans. Sometimes that's T. Higgins. I'm not really going to players like DJ Moore yet. So if you can get wide receiver, Keenan Allen as well. A player nobody talks about. They're kind of boring in the sense that they're going to get 10.5 targets per game on average. So I'm starting the wide receiver run here, and I'm not particularly picky.
Yeah, you mentioned Pittman, but that's the guy for me here. And I think you're taking on some risk in doing so, but only because we haven't seen him have that breakout year yet as an alpha receiver. But I think all of the stars are aligned for him to do it this year. You can say the same for Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams is a mid-second round pick. I have no problem with anybody drafting him. But Michael Pittman, he's coming off a almost 1,100-yard season, 6 touchdowns, 88 receptions, which is really mind-blowing that you look at how deep this position has become. That was only good for wide receiver 26. I mean, he was outside of the top 25 last year with basically rounding up 90 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 6 touchdowns. That's pretty crazy. But yeah, I know it's nuts. You look at it, you could just go back, not too many years ago, and that would have put you easily inside the top 20, like easily inside the top 20. So, yeah, either way, fact remains, he's got Matt Ryan. They have a strong offensive line, probably, they're above average. I'd put them around, around 10th right now, maybe borderline top 10. They have arguably the best rushing game in the league with Jonathan Taylor, and not a whole lot of competition for targets with Pittman. But the good thing about Pittman is that he's big. So if you're looking at a guy, Michael Pittman, you go, all right, he's 6'4", 220. You actually can put Pittman pretty much anywhere you want. He should be a big body to be used more in the red zone than he was before. If you're getting Michael Pittman in the 3rd round, I feel great about it. Now, my question for you is, are you comfortable with him as your wide receiver 1?
Yep. I think any 3rd round wide receiver, that's the prerequisite, right? Especially when we're considering we're going to start drafting wide receivers in a chunk here. I really like chunk or block drafting this year. Running back, 3 wide receivers, maybe include a tight end in there. And I do think that we're going to separate these 2 tiers in a minute. And I do think these alpha prototypes like Michael Pittman, like A.J. Brown, like Keenan Allen get an extra boost. That's why we're taking them in the middle of the 3rd instead of the 4th. So you have to say that if you're taking Pittman. I certainly believe that. We're talking opportunity value a lot today. I think the value of his opportunity is going to be much higher with Matt Ryan on the field.
It's also entirely possible that you could start a team with Dalvin Cook, Javonte Williams, and Michael Pittman and feel pretty good about something like that. Or Dalvin Cook and even Alvin Kamara and Michael Pittman. I'd feel great going into the 4th round with that being my setup. And when you're looking at the 4th round, I mean, Breece Hall, have I gone back? I'm not sure there's been anybody, and I'll be completely transparent with you on this one. I don't know if there's been a player all year where one day I wake up and I'm here on Breece Hall, and then I'm here, and then I'm here, and it's super easy. It's super easy to let like news sway you one way or the other. I'm not worried about the preseason too much, but then it's like, Michael Carter didn't play that game. Breece Hall did play that game, and he racked up 0 yards on 4 carries. And then Robert Saleh saying that, Michael Carter is still the starter. How long does that last for? I don't know. But I do know this, Matt, and not to get too off topic here because we're going into the 4th round and I want to get your pick, but I do think you're going to be able to see Breece Hall slip far enough to where if you are willing to take that risk, you can. And I don't think anymore you're going to be seeing, because ADPs take a little while to adjust often. You're not going to see Breece Hall going in the early 4th round, or at least you shouldn't. And at least recently, I definitely haven't.
I believe you are correct here. I think you'll see him slowly slip maybe into the 5th or even 6th round of some home drafts where there's some Jets hatred, like producer Phil was saying. And one thing we should mention that historically, running backs in the mid-3rd through the mid-7th round have underperformed their ADP expectations. Not as a whole, not every single time, but on average, they have performed slightly under expectations. Now, there are ways to try to avoid those landmines, taking young, talented players with not a lot of tread on their tires who have fantastic athletic profiles, even if their situations don't look that well. That is definitely Breece Hall this year. In that regard, it's also Travis Etienne. There's certainly amount of risk, especially in the early weeks. We might not be able to start them until week 6 or 7. You need to be able to weather the storm there. But they also have league-winning upside in ways that players like Javonte Williams in the 2nd round do as well. So the upside is alluring. I just think you need to be conscientious of the floor as well and draft for floor around those players if you choose to take them.
So then who in the 4th round stands out as the guy that has the ceiling but also has the floor? I think round 4, you can start taking a little bit more risk for sure. Mm-hmm. But if you can get the guy with the floor and the ceiling, there's never a reason not to do that either.
So if you're in the mid half of the 4th round or later, like the 4, 5, 6, 7 or later than that in your draft, take a peek at quarterback. See what the draft room looks like. Is Josh Allen off the board? Probably. Is the QB2, usually Herbert or Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, off the board? Probably. If not, maybe you're in a pretty savvy, rational draft room. Around 48 to 50 is where the QB2 should actually go in drafts. So if they're there, it's a possibility. It's not my favorite. My favorite pick is continuing the wide receiver run and going with Jalen Waddle. I know Tyreek Hill is there. I'm not as high on Tua Tagovailoa taking that superstar leap as I am Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, but I think that Waddle, assuming health, he's not practiced for a few weeks. There are not a lot of players who have this high of draft capital, this strong of opportunity and efficiency their rookie year, and who fall flat on their face their sophomore year. The career trajectory for players like Waddle, especially when you talk about defensive backs having more to handle with Tyreek Hill on the field, can often look really good. I think there's still a 20% target share up for grabs, even with Tyreek Hill, who's going to be a more volatile boom or bust player than people realize, in my opinion. I think he's going to be the steady drumbeat, that 10 PPR fantasy point player that you really want in the 4th round, a perfect wide receiver too.
How do you come to terms with the unknown with Tyreek Hill? I'm sure people will ask this question, so I'll pose it first. The fact that, like you said, going into sophomore year, but also the uncertainty surrounding Tua Tagovailoa under center.
I think it's enough to say that actually Jalen Waddle is a late 4th, early 5th round pick. And you could even argue and say, I would rather choose more certainty within the offense and go with a player like Allen Robinson, who's technically got a 5th round ADP. But if you just wanted to flip these players straight up in your rankings, I don't think that's irrational. In a perfect world, I'm at the end of the 4th, and unfortunately, the quarterbacks are going early, and I'm just double tapping Waddle and Allen Robinson. That is my favorite 4-5 turn. I mean, talk about the quality of the offense. No concern whatsoever there. The quality of the wide receiver, too, within that Rams offense, between Robert Woods and Odell Beckham was fantastic. I think Allen Robinson has the best season of his career, assuming none of the quarterbacks fall to me in value. I want to go wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round. And that gives me a ton of freedom with this next tier of quarterback and running back, which I think is a whole lot of fun.
There is so much in round 4 that I do not like. Like there's more in round 4 that I don't like than I do like. And I don't think I could say that for any other round, like including later in the draft.
I thought the same thing.
All right.
Now I want to ask your opinion on one player we haven't talked a whole lot about, Terry McLaurin. Best quarterback probably of McLaurin's career. And yet his ADP has not changed at all. Are you feeling okay about him as a 4th round wide receiver option?
I think he's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Bring Dotson in. Who knows if he's going to be heavily involved early on. I don't know what the offense is going to look like. I guess, is Antonio Gibson the number 1 again?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
He has to be. Brian Robinson took 2 shots, I think, to the leg. So they might not put it. By the way, he might not go on injured reserve. It's possible that he doesn't miss nearly as much time as people are suggesting. So.
I actually just saw that we got a notification as we were recording that he's going on the NFI list. So he's going to miss 4 games.
He is. When did this come up?
I just within the last 15 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, really new information as we're recording this on Thursday afternoon. So I do think Brian Robinson gets back this season. Just incredible that he's going to be okay. And it's like a bigger than football situation for sure. But from a football standpoint, Antonio Gibson definitely is the one. J.D. McKissic has a clear-cut role. And I guess the 5th, 6th round, that has the makings of an RB dead zone pick to me nonetheless.
Yeah,
there's just too much uncertainty.
It's
even
not
with
great.
Robinson out.
As for your question about Terry McLaurin, I don't know. Yeah, I think Wentz is probably it would have been Fitzpatrick had he not been injured, early in that week 1 game for sure. I mean, anybody playing fantasy football is perfectly fine with Fitzpatrick getting picked off. Certain games where he just goes out there, slings it, throws 3 picks, but still throws for 300 yards and a pair of touchdowns. Like anybody's okay with that. With Carson Wentz, is he the best he's had? Sure. But I think that's a low bar to get over, like very low bar. And to McLaurin's credit, he's performed well with bad quarterbacks in the past.
Right.
So I think in the 4th round, he's fine. Yeah. But this is a spot. I would not want to take McLaurin any earlier than where he's going. I honestly would rather take a gamble on Travis Etienne. That's the type of guy where I wouldn't be surprised if Jacksonville's offense is actually, halfway competent this year. And if that's the case, then Travis Etienne is going to benefit considerably. You look at, Miles Sanders and Doug Peterson's last season with the Eagles. He averaged around 18 looks per game. And that was I believe that was the year where he had 1 year where he was phenomenal pass catching and then he just completely fell off. But I think you could see enough touches for Travis Etienne, enough efficiency, and a good enough offense for if you are like myself in a draft that I had the other day, and it just kept falling to places where I had to take wide receivers. It was just the most opportune spot to take them early on. Then I'm landing Travis Etienne there because I think the ceiling is high enough, and then I'll grab a bunch of running backs later. But not the best round. Neither is the 5th. I mean, for me though, Matt, Courtland Sutton is just going to be the guy that I'm trying to land in the 5th round every single time.
Hey guys, if you haven't heard about Underdog Fantasy yet, you are missing out. It is truly the best place to play fantasy football, and best ball fantasy football is a great twist on our favorite game. No waiver wires, no transactions, no trades. You just draft a team and win big prizes. And at Underdog, they've had so many great tournaments all off season long. The puppy drafts, that's just $5 entries. The Pomeranian drafts, just $3 entries. And the Best Ball Mania tournament, which has 3 different opportunities to win $1 million. And we've got a great offer for you over at Stokastic. If you use promo code Stokastic, Stokastic, you will get a first match deposit bonus over at Underdog up to $100. And the gifts don't stop there. At Stokastic, we'll give you the free Best Ball Rankings and Draft Kit, including our Fantasy Football Rankings for all platforms and scoring. Absolutely free. A $70 value, absolutely free with promo code Stokastic. Oh, he's such a smash. Yeah, if I can't get Allen Robinson or one of Robinson or Waddle, then he's my next best bet. Man, this is just a perfect setup. This is just a perfect setup with the newly paid Russell Wilson.
Yeah, big.
I think Cortland Sutton has scored 8 total touchdowns in his last 3 seasons. I think he has more than that this year. Sutton, I don't see any issue other than the fact that there will be some ping-ponging with Judy in terms of I think Sutton is the one who has the highest probability of leading the team in targets every week, but the touchdown probability for a player like Sutton is still the highest compared to Judy. So I think it's just a really easy bet at ADP.
So, yeah, and let's be fair, last 2 years, because he didn't play in 2020.
Yeah, it's a little statistical turn of phrase, a little trickery with the.
Yeah,
the last 91 weeks.
Right, exactly. Do you want to talk about a guy that is really never played with a good quarterback either? I mean, it's Cortland Sutton too. Yeah. Cortland Sutton's never played with a truly competent quarterback, and the ability to get hooked up on deep balls with Russell Wilson is what sells me on this guy every time. And we already saw him have an 1,100-yard season with 6 scores back in 2019. Go look at the quarterbacks from that year. Tell me if you don't think Russell Wilson's better, even in his, as he gets older. I love Cortland Sutton. I love A.J. Dillon too, but you already knew that. Who are you going to here?
So you don't pay Russell Wilson unless the money he just did, unless he looks incredible in camp. So I'm not worried about Russell Wilson at all. We talk about the 5th round or the 6th round, because my 5th round is Allen Robinson, Cortland Sutton. Okay. Cortland Sutton. Yeah, I'm trying to continue the run of wide receivers. Brandon Cooks in the 5th round is not my favorite. I will say that. But the others, Allen Robinson, even Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, much preferred. I really, really like that spot. Again, if you have a rational QB market in your room, maybe there's a quarterback available to you. But if you're okay with me moving to the 6th round, I want to talk about this round because it is my favorite round in the entire draft this year.
Let's do it.
There are
real quick though.
Yeah.
If you didn't get any tight ends and a lot of the guys you were looking for in the 5th round aren't there, you don't want to go Brandon Cooks. You don't want to go with a quarterback yet. Maybe you don't want to go Joe Burrow. I do think Dalton Schultz is perfectly reasonable there and could have a monster year.
Great call. It was Leprie's flag plant tight end. I
liked him a lot. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So
all right, talk to me. Round 6. Got some interesting ones here for sure.
Interesting to say the least, and some players who have moved up the draft board over the last few weeks, but I think there aren't actually a lot of players I don't want. The players I'm avoiding are Damian Harris, TJ Hawkinson, Amari Cooper, probably Darnell Mooney in this kind of build that I'm talking about. But other than that, I will take anybody. Gabriel Davis. Look, we might have talked him down earlier, and it is a scary pick because it is that one play that you need to have exceed their previous expectations. But the noise coming out of Buffalo is really strong this year that Gabriel Davis is going to be a 1B. I think Diggs and Davis should be drafted in the same way that Chase and Higgins should be drafted. It should be that Davis is right up next to Diggs by any stretch. But why is Higgins significantly lower in ADP? That is the discount I'm chasing there. If that is too rich for your blood for a player who has not done that, go for Jalen Hurts. I think this is a great spot to tap quarterback. I talked about A.J. Brown. I do not mind stacking them up with a little skinny stack, and the rushing upside is the way he gets to that quarterback 1 overall. Number 1 in carries per game, number 1 in red zone carries per game among quarterbacks last year. Honorable mention Juju Smith-Schuster, but Jalen Hurts, probably my favorite pick in that entire round.
Yeah, I'm with you. 10 rushing touchdowns, 10 last year. Led the league in rushing yards among quarterbacks. I'm not saying you get, touchdowns are volatile for sure. And I don't think Miles Sanders finishes with 0, assuming he gets on the field. But I like Jalen Hurts there a lot too. I mean, if it comes down to drafting, getting a skill position, if it comes down to me getting, say, a Cortland Sutton instead of a Joe Burrow in round 5, and then landing Jalen Hurts in the 6th and getting the best of both worlds, you damn well better believe that I'm on board with that every single time. I love Gabe Davis. I'm with you. I think that's a good point that, T. Higgins is going in the mid third round to Jamar Chase in the first. Gabriel Davis, and granted, a lot of this is because he hasn't proven it outside of, the conclusion of the last season and then that divisional round game where he went insane. But you're right. He's going a while after Stefon Diggs. Not to say that Diggs shouldn't go in the first, but if you do believe they are that close, then either Diggs should be going in the second and Davis in like the fourth or fifth, or Davis should be moved up the draft board quite a bit. I don't love Amari Cooper. I don't love Hawkinson. I know you mentioned Hawkinson. What did you say about Cooper? Any thoughts on him? Did you mention him?
He is as close to don't draft at ADP as I really get in this part of the draft. Him and DK Metcalf. I will say this. If you were looking for this year's Brandon Cooks, I might ask, why not Amari Cooper? Who else is catching passes? I mean, people are hyping up Njoku and Peoples-Jones, but it's Jacoby Brissett. It's not going to be pretty. But if you told me at the end of the season that Amari Cooper ended up averaging 12.5 targets per game, you go, well, yeah, I get why. I get why that happened.
I get it. And to be fair, Cooks was like an 8th rounder last year, so we were getting better value on him, I'd say. But yeah, I see where you're going with that. 7th round, I did draft Miles Sanders yesterday because I got him at 90th overall. Yes, I will take Miles Sanders 90th overall any day of the week. This has him at a 7th round ADP, but Devin Singletary's here as well. This is where, and once we get into round 8 as well, mind you, some of these drafts, you're going to see it push back. You're going to see like 7th or like 8th and 9th round for some of these guys, opposed to 7th and 8th. They're going to be kind of sprinkled throughout.
The variance will start to widen. Yes.
Absolutely. I absolutely believe that if you are, maybe you went with one anchor running back early on, or you just didn't get anybody you loved, this is where, if you need some depth and you want some pieces where you can say, all right, I'll flex them in, or I can rotate these guys in, or no, I think there's enough value here to where they still are the lead backs. They could have big seasons. Guys like Singletary, guys like Sanders, where you're not paying as much for them. And then again, once we get into the 8th and 9th round, we'll talk about it some more. This is where I think you can make a difference if you're not loaded at running back in the early rounds.
100%. There are just natural spots in the draft that are more, how do I say this, like fruitful than others, where the actual players who fit that level of draft here, there's actually just more than you could actually draft. And I think the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th round absolutely fits that bill from a ceiling and floor perspective. And if you are playing auction, this is a great year to do like modified studs and duds where you get a lot of these 6th through 8th rounders. Like they're usually like $8 through $13 in that range when you're playing a $200 auction budget. Different in every league, I know. But as we start to go into the 7th round with like Devin Singletary, one of my favorite players in all of fantasy, and you have great quarterbacks with QB1 upside like Tom Brady and Dak Prescott. Obviously, you're considering the players you drafted in the first 6 rounds before. But if you want high floor running backs, go with Miles Sanders. If you want high floor wide receivers, go with Adam Thielen. If you want high ceiling running backs, go Devin Singletary. If you want high ceiling wide receivers, you got Rashad Bateman. And if you want just a solid quarterback, you can take the rushing upside of Dak Prescott or the QB1 overall upside of Tom Brady. Just an awesome 7th round this year.
It is. This feels like the round where you can make a difference if you do it right. It truly does. And it isn't to say that you can do it wrong. Maybe you could. I don't know. I think
Elijah Moore is the wrong way.
I do too.
To play 7th round.
I'm also, was out on Edmonds last year. Different team, but same theory for me. Same philosophy when it comes to Chase Edmonds for me. I'm not convinced that he's going to be the number one. Again, call me crazy, Matt, and I can accept it. Listen, the more you want to go back and forth, the more I enjoy it. Can't grow otherwise. I think Raheem Mostert, if he's healthy, is going to have a significant role in this offense. Because you know why? The guy, when healthy, is actually good. Go look at all of his metrics. Go look at his speed as well.
Yes.
Like he has two of the three fastest speeds in the league in 2020, I think it was. Raheem Mostert's not bad if he's healthy. It's just he's never healthy.
Somebody in the analytics or player personnel department in Miami knows a little bit about game speed because they are looking to run track stars out there between
Hill, Waddle, Raheem Mostert. I thought the same thing the other day, man.
What's the old phrase? Speed kills.
That would be it. Yes.
Yeah, I do think this could work. Don't get me wrong. Chase Edmonds is not my favorite pick. And it's kind of interesting. Myles Gaskin apparently outplayed Sony Michel outright and won that roster spot.
Yeah. So Sony's in. What did he go? The Chargers now?
Yeah. Signed recently with the Chargers. I think that's a fine. I think he's objectively better than Isaiah Spiller and what's his name, Kelly, who's over there.
Josh.
Yeah, Josh Kelly. That's fine. Chase Edmonds not my pick in the 7th round. As you get into the 8th. One of my favorite phrases starts to pop up. The warts on the profile are there, but you still have QB1 upside, tight end 1 upside. And so if you need a onesie position, this is definitely a place where you could start to look.
I'm taking shots on Raheem Mostert in the double-digit rounds.
Oh, you're just avoiding Chase outright and just like
same thing I did with James Conner last year in San Francisco or in Arizona. I'm not saying Mostert's going to be James Conner from last year, but
wow,
yeah, I'm saying I just said I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that I think everybody wrote James Conner off again. Everybody wrote James. Oh, he's nothing but a depth piece. This and that. Okay, and again, you're going to see Raheem Mostert written off. All I'm saying,
funny. I said wow. I said wow because I saw the flash. I saw how it works for Raheem Mostert. Right? He has a few breakaway runs. Chase Edmonds drops a few passes. Suddenly they're like, why don't we swing the super fast guy out wide? And so now he's doing the same things that you thought Edmonds was going to do. And now the only concern is maybe do they bring in Myles Gaskin at the goal line? We thought it was Sony, but I'd still rather have the upside there.
Like the whole appeal for sure with Conner last year was that we knew that he was the goal. But we knew that he had the size and track record of being,
right.
A goal line option. But anyway, round 8, I'm going to Rashad Penny. I like Tony Pollard. Like again, this is just for me, Matt, spots where I can load up on some really good depth there. What do you think about the other guys in this round?
I'm going with an Eagle and a former Eagle. I think they're kind of unsexy picks.
You love this offense this year, don't you?
I got to take a stand somewhere. I will say that it's probably unwise to stack up Smith, Brown, and Hurts. But I think Devonta Smith has a fantastic sophomore leap in his range of outcomes, even with A.J. Brown on the field. You don't just draft somebody in the top 10 to stop using them. The real galaxy brain thing, and I don't believe this, by the way, is that you bring A.J. Brown to bring all the defensive attention over there, and Devonta Smith is just roasting number 2 cornerbacks all day long, and he's wide open in this offense, scores 10 touchdowns even on a limited target share. I'm definitely still in on him at ADP. Zach Ertz is, talk about it, not a fun pick, but it's your last opportunity to get an average of 7 targets per game at the tight end position, which can be really valuable. They paid him this offseason. Even if he's 32 years old, I think they plan on using him significantly, regardless of who the wide receiver 1 is. And then I do think you can take a chance on DeAndre Hopkins if you feel like you can build up depth around him. Having a wide receiver 1 insert in the week 7 mark is always fun. I think they're going to go right back to him when he's on the field.
I think you're spot on with Devonta Smith. 8th round, 1st round draft capital just last year. A lot of it's going to come down to whether or not Jalen Hurts can throw the football. And clearly, I'm not telling you, that's not earth-shattering information. Like, you don't tune in the podcast to hear someone say, yeah, Jalen Hurts needs to throw better. But they have positioned him really nicely to do so. And can we take a step back for a second, Matt, and just acknowledge the fact that before A.J. Brown, not in Philly, before A.J. Brown came to the league, before Jamar Chase, before Justin Jefferson, can we just acknowledge that 916 yards and 5 touchdowns for a rookie is pretty good?
It's really good. It's the same reason we're drafting
on the most run-heavy team in the league. Sorry, on the most run-heavy team in football.
100%. I'm impressed. It's sort of like you have to, when you're creating projections and you're building out target shares and snap shares, you have to divert a certain amount of this offensive opportunity to A.J. Brown, or you're going to look like a fool. The efficiency is harder to project, touchdowns per target, things like that. But if you told me it was really, really high for a player like Devonta Smith and his yak was really high on a per target basis, no one should be surprised.
No. And to be clear, I'm with you on that. I'm not suggesting that he should be way higher in ADP. What I'm saying is we know the talent is there. Like, he had a successful rookie season. He was good as a rookie on a team that ran the ball 600 times every Sunday. So, assuming they go more pass heavy, even with A.J. Brown, you just might see a very dynamic offense. But with that in mind, 8th round for Devonta Smith, again, let's say you go running back heavy early on, and I think that's entirely reasonable. The league I was in yesterday was you had to play 3 wide receivers and you had a flex. So you know how that works, Matt.
Yeah.
People get tripped up on that all the time. They don't look at their roster. They go, okay. And they go a lot of running backs early, and then they realize they have to start 3 receivers. Changes the game up. Consider it.
Know your league, folks.
Always know your league. Yeah. Always. I made that mistake before. Sometimes when I get in too many of them, I forget, it's this or that or whatever, but it happens. Just don't let that happen. But if you go running backs early on and Devonta Smith ends up being your wide receiver 3, say, in a league where you have to start 3 receivers, I would be okay with that.
And at the end of round 8, I also have a quarterback I really, really like. It's a little bit high in ADP. I'd like him later, but Matthew Stafford, I think, is still actually being underrated after the best season of his career. When you get into round 9, I think there are some other decent wide receiver 3 candidates. A lot of people have talked up players like Christian Kirk, who have very little in terms of target competition, despite it being a mediocre Jacksonville offense at best. You have the possible wide receiver 1 in Green Bay, in Allen Lazard. But I actually want to talk about 2 players here. One, this is where Dameon Pierce should go.
It is not where he will go.
It's not where he will go. That's correct. So that if you've heard that name over the preseason, this is where he should go. And if he's there, grab him. I think Robert Woods is my favorite player in the 9th round. I think you convinced me of that.
I don't think you're wrong. Like, Tannehill's not that bad. Tannehill's fine. He's an average quarterback, right? For fantasy purposes, he's a league average quarterback.
His per pass efficiency is better than average. His per pass accuracy is better than average.
Yeah.
And so has Robert Woods' per pass efficiency been when healthy. Obviously, the giant concern is how healthy is he. But he's been practicing since day 1 of camp without a brace, apparently. Like, this dude's ready to go.
He said his knee is not – he said it's an afterthought. He doesn't even think about the knee anymore. Said it's a thing of the past.
Now I'm kind of just rooting for him because the concentration of targets is going to be there. Like, there's no concern about volume.
I'm with you. If it comes down to him or Allen Lazard, I'm going Allen Lazard just because I still believe that Aaron Rodgers is the type of quarterback that, after this guy's been on the team for a while now, enough years. MVS is gone. Devonta Adams is gone. You don't have many, tenured guys, long tenured guys in this offense anymore that are catching passes. If Allen Lazard ends up being that guy for Aaron Rodgers, he doesn't need to be prime Jordy Nelson.
Right.
He doesn't need to be prime Devontae Adams. He just needs to be decent. And in the 9th round, I think he can actually be very good. So I think the ceiling on Allen Lazard is really high. I just don't have any idea where the floor is.
The floor is he's the same Allen Lazard we've seen the last 3 years.
Without 170 targets going to Devontae Adams. Yeah, right?
Somebody's got to catch the passes. Yeah, that's what you're going to say.
There has to be like 10 targets per game are just voided. That's just from Adams. Take another 5 from MVS. You're talking 15 per game. It's got to
they're
go
going to be a little more
somewhere.
conservative. Yeah. Aaron Jones.
I think we're on the same page here, though. Like, Alan Lazard, Robert Woods. I'd take them over James Cook any day, just in the same rounds. Or Chris Olave, a lot of competition. Maybe he ends up being phenomenal, but Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, and Jarvis Landry are all still pretty good, I'd say. Pretty good.
Yeah, and Trey Lance sometimes hangs out here. If you're looking, that he's kind of the last gasp at QB1 overall because of the rushing upside. Prefer him in the 9th, 10th round. Sometimes in savvier leagues, he hangs out around the 7th, 8th, like right after Jalen Hurts. That's a little bit tough. Then the 10th round is a really interesting spot.
Let me set the table for you here.
Okay, go
so
for
that
it.
we'll close it out. Because I agree. Very interesting. But, okay, this is where you start getting into some handcuffs. Not split backfields, but handcuffs, right? Like Madison to Dalvin Cook. And you've got a Kadarius Toney, but then James Robinson, and then ETN. Chase Claypool's another one of those guys. But Darrell Henderson, back up. The reason I wanted to set the table for you, though, is because you mentioned Elijah Moore as someone that you wouldn't really want in that 7th round. Don't disagree. You got Garrett Wilson, right? Mid-first round rookie, early mid-first round rookie. And then you got Treylon Burks. We just talked about Robert Woods. You have Nyheim Hines as well. But which of these guys, when you're looking at the makeup, the composition of their teams, do you think has the best chance to succeed given what's ahead of them? Because all of these guys have something ahead of them.
I actually think it's Treylon Burks.
Okay.
I actually think
had
it's
a
Treylon
feeling you were
Burks.
going to go there. That's why I wanted to set it up like that.
I hate this is where we have to talk about range of outcomes and that we don't actually know every single answer before the season starts. But you trade away AJ Brown on the clock, essentially on draft night, knowing what the draft board at wide receiver looks like, and then you take Treylon Burks. So you say we can replace our wide receiver production with Robert Woods, who was already signed, and this player. Camp has not been great. Preseason has not been great, although he scored. Now everyone's fine again. Treylon Burks is an elite talent with elite athleticism who could put it together in year one. You know, if he is this year's A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, no one should be surprised. That is still the most likely outcome here. Now, I was going to say, and it kind of goes to your earlier point about shooting for ceiling once we get out of the starter rounds, pick 10 is usually that turn, right? You're either at the last starter or you're at the first or second bench spot, depending on your league size. So think in the back of your mind, you're much more interested in filling up your upside meter. But if you fill up your possible starter meter as well, that's a secondary objective you should try to hit. I think players like Nyheim Hines in that regard kind of fit the bill. I think you can get a quality start out of him every couple of weeks in terms of probability. Same with Darrell Henderson. So I do try to push it and go for starter capability right around round 10. But if I love the upside, I love the value, or I love Treylon Burks or Olave, happy to go for it and start loading up on that upside meter right from round 10 and beyond.
Matt and I'll be back next week doing it again. Are we starting Wednesday? Are we starting Wednesday this coming week?
I believe we are. I believe week one starts our new schedule.
It would make sense because you got Thursday night football coming up. Been a great offseason, a lot of fun. Be back here Wednesday. So hopefully we'll release at the same time, but it'll be Wednesdays. So make sure to bookmark that. Follow Matt at Draftaholic. Follow me at Loughy_D, LOUGHY_D. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe, leave a review, rating, whatever you have time for. Greatly appreciated. Shout out to Phil for producing this one. Have a good weekend.